In the sweltering heat of the Ashwood County courtroom in Georgia, Elijah Brooks stood alone. His faded denim shirt hung loosely on his broad frame, the same shirt he had worn to church just 2 days earlier. It wasn't slick or professional, but it was honest, like Elijah himself. His hands, scarred and calloused from decades of working Georgia's red soil, gripped the edge of the podium. Those hands had fought droughts, storms, and busted equipment to keep his family's farm alive. But today, Elijah wasn't fighting the elements. He was fighting Garrison Hydraulics, a powerful corporation that had laid a pipeline across his land, siphoning off the creek that fed his crops. Without that water, his fields would wither. And with them, the legacy his family had built over generations would vanish. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs from a packed gallery. Reporters, county officials, and townsfolk who had come to witness the spectacle of a lone farmer challenging a corporate giant. Their eyes took in Elijah's rugged appearance, his slow southern drawl, the way he stood firm, like one of the oak trees rooted in his land. He wasn't here for their approval. He was here to defend what was his. But the warning that had arrived the night before lingered in his mind. A note slipped under his front door. "Back off, Brooks, or you'll lose everything." Judge Victoria Hensley presided over the courtroom, her posture rigid and gaze sharp as flint. A respected figure in Ashwood's legal circles, she was known for her strict rulings. To her, Elijah Brooks was an oddity, an unpolished farmer trying to drag a corporation into her courtroom. As Elijah stepped forward, her lips curled with a faint, condescending smile. "Mr. Brooks," she said, voice clipped and cool, "you're here about irrigation concerns?" Her tone made the words sound trivial, and snickers rippled through the audience. Elijah's jaw tightened, but his voice remained calm, that Georgia cadence undeterred. "Yes, ma'am. That pipeline Garrison Hydraulics ran through my land is stealing water from my lower field. That creek's been running through my family's farm since my granddad's time. Without it, corn won't grow, beans won't sprout, and the Brooks name dries up with it." His words were simple, but they carried the weight of truth. This wasn't just about water. It was about a family's survival. Judge Hensley leaned back, amusement glinting in her eyes. "Irrigation," she repeated with a smirk. "Do you have formal documentation of this diversion? Or are we going by your word, Mr. Brooks?" The courtroom chuckled. Elijah's fingers gripped the podium tighter. He reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out a folded letter, its corners worn and soft from being read too often. It was a complaint he had written to the county months earlier, ignored like so many other warnings. He handed it to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. "I sent this. Got no reply. So now, I'm here, asking you to listen." The room quieted as the judge scanned the letter. But Elijah wasn't the only one feeling the weight of the moment. At the back of the room, a man in a tailored dark suit sat still, his cold eyes fixed on Elijah. A leather-bound notebook rested on his lap, though he hadn't written a word. He was watching, calculating. Judge Hensley finished reading. "This is not conclusive," she said, tone sharpening. "Do you have anything else to prove your claims?" Her skepticism was evident, but Elijah lifted his chin. "I got the truth. I know that creek better than I know most folks. It's been ours for generations. And I know Garrison's profiting while my crops die." His eyes briefly locked with those of Michael Vane, the defense attorney for Garrison, seated at the opposing table with a smug smile. But Elijah's words carried a deeper accusation, one aimed at something larger than a single company, something that had left that threatening note on his doorstep. Vane rose to speak. "Your Honor, while Mr. Brooks's passion is admirable, his claims lack legal standing. The creek he refers to isn't mapped on any current property survey. Garrison Hydraulics acted well within its rights." But there was a slight flicker of nervousness in his eyes. "Then explain why my field's dry," Elijah snapped. "Why my crops are failing while your client rakes in profit." The gallery stirred. Judge Hensley pounded the gavel. "Order," she barked. But her gaze lingered on Elijah just a moment longer, and her expression wavered. What she saw was no longer a backcountry farmer. She saw a man who wouldn't back down. And somewhere deep in the room, the man in the dark suit took note and tightened his grip on that notebook. The Ashwood County Courthouse felt like a furnace in the Georgia summer, stifling and full of silent judgment. Elijah Brooks stood at the witness podium, his denim shirt soaked with sweat, hands clutching a faded folder. But it was Judge Victoria Hensley's gaze that weighed heaviest, cold, piercing, as if to say he didn't belong there. "Your Honor," Elijah began, his voice steady despite the pounding in his chest, "I'm not here to waste anyone's time. The pipeline that Garrison Hydraulics ran across my land dried up the creek. I have clear evidence." He held up photographs, maps drawn by his father, and a ledger from 1962. Hensley barely glanced at them before scoffing. "Handwritten notes and blurry images? You think farm nostalgia can replace legal documentation?" Laughter echoed around the room. Elijah clenched his fists. He'd faced scorn from banks and county officials, now a courtroom. But he wouldn't back down. Attorney Michael Vane stood, his voice smooth and rehearsed. "Your Honor, Mr. Brooks presents only sentimental speculation. The creek isn't marked on official maps." Elijah fired back. "Who made those maps? The people stealing the water? You can't erase what's existed for generations with the stroke of a pen." The room stirred. Hensley slammed her gavel. "You're insulting the judicial process. This is a court of law, not a barn. And this is my life, not a show trial." Elijah retorted. Just then, a man emerged from the back shadows of the courtroom, a polished black briefcase in hand. "Permission to speak," he said, his voice calm, yet commanding. "Name's Elliot Crane. I represent Garrison Hydraulics." Hensley squinted. "And your role in this case?" "Damage control," Crane replied. "I'm submitting new documentation from our side." The materials were dense with technical jargon and official stamps, flatly denying Elijah's claims. Hensley nodded in approval. "Now this is evidence." Elijah stood still, but fire boiled inside. "These documents are fake," he said. "I may not be a lawyer, but I've got memory and a conscience." "You've said enough," Hensley cut him off. "One more disruption, and I'll charge you with contempt." Outside, Elijah's phone buzzed. A strange number. "Mr. Brooks, this is Agent Sam Carter with the FBI. Meet me at the old diner on Route 43. Now, when Elijah arrived at the diner, Agent Carter was already seated, his expression tense. "We're investigating Garrison Hydraulics," he said. "You're close to exposing a widespread corruption network. That makes you a target." He handed Elijah a burner phone and a USB drive. "Don't use your regular phone. Don't trust anyone, not even court staff." That night, Elijah returned home. The air was unusually still. He flipped the light switch and heard the floor creak on the back porch. Grabbing his shotgun, he stepped outside. A shadow darted toward the barn. Elijah followed and was hit by the sharp stench of gasoline. Someone meant to burn his livelihood down. The attacker rushed him, knocking the gun away. They struggled. Elijah took a blow to the shoulder, but fought back and recovered his shotgun. "Who sent you?" he demanded. The man backed off, eyes cold. "You're already dead, farmer." Then he vanished into the night. The next morning, the courthouse was packed. #Justice for Elijah had gone viral. Judge Hensley looked unfazed. "Mr. Brooks, bring real evidence today. I was threatened. My home was targeted. I have proof." Elijah submitted a torn piece of the attacker's clothing, photos of the gasoline canister, and witness names. The room went quiet. Hensley hesitated. Elijah then produced a yellowed letter written by his father in 1962. "They take our water, our land, our future." Simple but powerful. This isn't just land. It's history. It's blood, sweat, and family, Elijah said. "You can laugh at my accent, but not at the truth." Applause erupted. Hensley slammed her gavel, but her hands trembled. Elijah was no longer just a farmer. He was a symbol. 3 days later, the ruling came down. This court finds Garrison Hydraulics in violation of Mr. Brooks' water rights. The pipeline must be dismantled and damages paid. Outside, hundreds cheered. Elijah stood tearfully. He had won, not just for himself, but for a forgotten generation of farmers. The FBI's USB led to statewide investigations. Garrison collapsed. Elliot Crane disappeared. Elijah, once a humble farmer, became a voice for justice. Judge Hensley later visited his farm, admitting, "I was wrong." Elijah replied simply, "Seeing wrong is one thing. Fixing it is what counts." Together, they launched the Brooks-Hensley Fund to protect farmland statewide. The creek flowed again, like Elijah's voice, steady and never silenced. The days after the ruling were a whirlwind. Journalists trampled the red Georgia clay outside Elijah's modest farmhouse, their vans kicking up dust while satellite dishes pointed skyward. Elijah, uncomfortable in the spotlight, answered questions in his soft drawl, but never let the attention change him. His fields, long thirsty, began to breathe again. Volunteers from nearby towns arrived to help till the land, reconnect irrigation lines, and clear brush. Strangers brought seeds, tools, even tractors. Farmers who had once felt powerless now saw Elijah as their voice. But not everyone celebrated. One night, Elijah returned from a town hall meeting to find his barn tagged with red spray paint. This ain't over. Elijah didn't flinch. He took a bucket of white paint the next morning and covered the threat. Then, in large block letters, he painted over it. Stand your ground. A week later, Agent Carter returned to the farm. With him were 2 agents in black suits and a battered briefcase filled with documents retrieved from a garrison whistleblower. Inside was a hidden ledger, coded payouts, land grabs, and falsified water surveys going back 20 years. This proves what you suspected, Carter said grimly. Judge Hensley wasn't the only official they tried to influence. We found wire transfers to commissioners, clerks, even surveyors. Elijah leaned against his porch rail, the ledger in his lap. How many other farms? He asked. Over 50. Most owners didn't fight back. Some signed away land they didn't know they were losing. Elijah's jaw tightened. That ends now. The next day, he organized the first meeting of what would become the Georgia Land and Water Alliance, uniting farmers, environmentalists, and lawyers. The room was standing room only. I didn't come here today to lead, Elijah began, looking over the crowd. But if no one else will speak, I will. They don't just want our land. They want us quiet. And I ain't going silent. Late one evening, as fireflies blinked like embers in the dusk, a pickup truck rumbled into Elijah's driveway. A woman stepped out, stiff-backed, weathered face, a familiar look in her eye. Judge Hensley, Elijah said, surprised. I came alone, she said, hands raised. I'm not here in robes. Just as Victoria. They sat on his porch, sipping iced tea. Silence stretched before she spoke. You made me see things I didn't want to admit, she said. Not just about the case, but about myself. About the way the system treats people who don't wear suits or speak with polish. Elijah nodded. Most folks don't get to speak in your court. They get spoken over. Victoria's eyes softened. That's why I want to help. There's a judges' conference next month. Let me bring your story there. Maybe it changes one more mind. He extended his hand. Then let's fix this from both sides. Weeks later, the FBI released its full report. Garrison Hydraulics had engaged in corporate sabotage, bribery, and environmental violations across 6 states. Arrests followed. Elliot Crane was placed on the FBI's most wanted list. His briefcase, abandoned in a safe house, contained one final memo. Terminate exposure at any cost. Brooks is expendable. The memo shocked the public. Elijah's story trended again. News outlets across the country replayed the courtroom clip where he said, "You can laugh at my accent, but not at the truth." A Senate subcommittee requested his testimony. Elijah stood before them in his best shirt. Not new, just clean, and spoke not as a politician, but as a farmer. I'm not here to talk fancy, he said. I'm here to talk about what's real. They tried to erase us, not just our land, but our dignity. And too often, we let them. The room was silent. Months later, the Brooks Hensley Fund officially launched. With grants from federal agencies and private donors, it began restoring damaged farmland and offering legal aid to rural families. Judge Hensley, now retired, traveled with Elijah to speak at rural schools, universities, and legal summits. On one visit, they stood at the edge of Elijah's newly planted cornfield. The creek gurgled beside them, clear and full again. You ever think this is where it'd all lead? She asked. Elijah chuckled. I thought I'd be lucky just to save the corn. She smiled. Instead, you planted a movement. Years later, a bronze plaque was placed near the courthouse steps. It read, "In honor of Elijah Brooks, who stood when others bowed, and reminded us all that the truth, like water, finds a way." Every year on the anniversary of the ruling, farmers and townsfolk gather at Elijah's land for what they now call Creek Day. They walk the length of the revived waterway, telling stories, passing seeds, and remembering that even one voice, if unshaken, can change everything. Elijah, now grayer, still works the land. When asked why he keeps farming, he always says, "Because this land knows me, and I owe it my voice."